Hello, everyone. Terrance here, and I'm excited to welcome back Sofia Vasilyeva for what we are planning to be a special bi-weekly chat where we talk about important topics related to parental alcohol harm and childhood adversity. If you remember from episode 10, Sofia was our guest where she told us about her awesome workshop for adult children of alcoholics. She is also a clinical doctoral candidate in psychotherapy and very recently published a book called Misery to Mastery, which I'm really excited to have her tell us more about and where we can purchase that later on. If you haven't yet, please go back and check out the episode Sofia was on, episode 10, because she provides a lot of awesome insight. So in episode 13 with Kate, we learned about protective factors and how we can protectively build them in adulthood. And today we're going to expand on this idea and talk about the positives of being an adult child of an alcoholic or ACOA. And I guess first of all, I should just welcome Sofia back. Welcome, Sofia.
Hi, Terrance. It's so good to be back. Really enjoyed our last chat and very much looking forward to this one. I think it's such an important topic that we're tackling today, which is the positives and the protective factors of being an ACOA.
Definitely. It's so good to hear the birds and the tropical sounds in your background. Great. So, yeah. So what are the positives of being an adult child of an alcoholic?
Well, I'll go into the positives more in detail as far as some of the defense mechanisms that adult children of alcoholics have. But, before we decided to record this episode, I had this idea to look into celebrities that are adult children of alcoholics. And I am very, very much uneducated about pop culture. I don't know celebrity gossip. I really don't know what's happening on a regular, but I did some quick searches and found some interesting information. And I want to start off by going over some, famous, wonderful people that we all love who, maybe some of us who were apparently adult children of alcoholics. And I discovered these fascinating stories. So Halle Berry is one. She's an adult child of an alcoholic. Her father was an alcoholic and was abusive. And she stated in some of her interviews that she has actually had problems in relationships, problems with men, and she relates those problems back to some self-destructive reactions that she links back to having grown up with an alcoholic father. So Halle Berry is one. Charlize Theron is another one. So her father was an alcoholic and he became very abusive, and her mother actually shot and killed her father when she was, I think, 15 years old. So she witnessed her father actually getting abusive with both her and her mother, and her mother shot and killed the father, and she witnessed this occurrence. Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's Charlize Theron, you said?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. She started modeling very young in South Africa, and then later came to Hollywood. But her, she had this incredible trauma. Now, Drew Barrymore, her father is an alcoholic, and probably for people, I didn't know this, but probably for people that are a little bit more insightful in pop culture, would also know that she actually started abusing drugs and alcohol at a very early age, when she was 9. And by the time I think she was 13, she had already, made it to rehab. And so her father is also an alcoholic. Nicki Minaj gave an interview. Her father was a crack addict and an alcoholic, and she says that actually, he was very abusive, and she watched her mother not being able to leave him, not being able to leave the father, and that taught her a lesson to learn how to leave bad situations behind. She says that's what she learned.
Wow.
Well, her father's an alcoholic. Apparently, she struggled with alcohol herself, and I think she was mostly raised by her mother. So she struggled with addiction. Demi Lovato, her biological father, at some point she gave an interview too. She says that he was hurting her. He was hurting her so much that she had to cut all ties with him. So I don't know what their situation is now, but back then.
Who was that?
That was Demi Lovato.
Mm.
Yeah. So Tyler Perry says that his father was constantly drunk, and he was actually molested by his friend's father, while his father at the same time was molesting another child. So, some very severe trauma there. And the list really goes on, but there are just few celebrities that popped up, and it's so interesting. I'm actually thinking of going, researching this further because I think it has a lot to say. But, as far as adult children of alcoholics, and building up, adult children of alcoholics, they're really wonderful people, really wonderful people. I meet, obviously, I work with adult children of alcoholics. I, meet them all the time, and not just in my work, but when I tell people, I wrote a book, or what do you do? I work with adult children of alcoholics. Well, my father was an alcoholic, my mother is an alcoholic. We start off the conversation, always marvelous people. And, I think some of the things, and going back to celebrities, and so many celebrities came up as adult children of alcoholics. One of the things that adult children of alcoholics, one of the traits that they build is they want to gain admiration, right? Adult children of alcoholics, they're looking for admiration. And when people are looking for admiration, when people focus on obtaining admiration, they're going to get admired. If you put your focus and getting admiration, you're going to get admired. And so what is the one way that you can get admiration, right? You go to Hollywood and you become a celebrity, and people will absolutely admire you. And there's so many other ways. You can write a book, you can, start up a big Instagram following, you can get really good at your job, you can get admiration, and it works.
Just a lot of external validation, it sounds like.
A lot of external. That's not to say that those people, that they're going to be happy inside, right? Like, once again, going back to celebrities, notorious for drug abuse, alcohol abuse, all kinds of relational problems, divorce, separation, so many struggles, suicide, overdose. So that speaks of the internal struggle, but that desire to earn admiration, it works. It becomes a driving factor for people, and it becomes a success story.
Right. Well, it's like they're very successful, but on the sort of back end, a lot of their life is kind of falling apart, right? There's a lot of struggles that are happening here and there when it comes to relationships, when it comes to addiction, but they may be very driven and very successful with whatever form of external validation they're pursuing.
Right. And, so, but that's not a small feat, right? To earn admiration, to earn validation, that is success in a way. Now there's the inner work. And so when, adult children of alcoholics building some of these very marvelous qualities, we have to kind of talk about balance. What is a balance? Now, you can get external admiration and validation, but how can you find that balance within yourself when you feel that you're worthy, when you feel just by your presence in the world, when you wake up every single morning, you are a worthy individual, and you have the freedom to enjoy life and to enjoy relationships and enjoy your work, find fulfillment. So it's that balance is hard to achieve.
Definitely, yeah. And I'd imagine that while there are positives to being an ACOA, there's also a risk of disbalance, correct? Because of the trauma we've endured.
Of course, of course. But going back to the positives too, I kind of want to outline, some of the positives that adult children of alcoholics carry. So I think it's very important. It's very important to be able to look at your positives and admire yourselves for having the positives, because adult children of alcoholics are notorious for highlighting their negatives and making their negatives a big focus.
Definitely.
Yep. So I want to talk about, some of these factors, right? So number one, resilience. There's actually studies that do show that adult children of alcoholics tend to be very resilient. So life throws a curveball at us, and they're able to overcome these challenges, maybe to a higher degree than an average person. Now, the other side of that is that adult children of alcoholics have also been dealt some pretty difficult cards. Right? So they're kind of starting ground in life is very different than somebody that comes from a kind of a quote unquote normal healthy family. So that is the resilience is there.
Yeah, and I mean it makes sense that resiliency would sort of become a survival ability, right? I mean, so if you're living in this chaotic, unpredictable, potentially dangerous home for years, your brain's going to get really good at navigating potentially difficult situations. So it makes sense that we would just be pretty adept at dealing with adversity and being resilient to adversity.
Right. We get used to disappointments. There's a lot of disappointments in the homes of alcoholics. You think you have plans to do something over the weekend, you're going to go somewhere, then the parent gets drunk and all of that gets canceled. There's financial difficulties a lot of alcoholic families struggle with. So there's a lot of disappointments that children have to overcome, and they find, which will go into some next wonderful traits that adult children of alcoholics built for themselves. A lot of the times they go into their world of creativity and are able to develop a creative focus for themselves as a coping mechanism. So we also see a lot of adult children of alcoholics being highly creative, even going back to celebrities. Some very creative people, artists, developing this capacity.
Steven Tyler's pretty creative, right? he did that the scatting stuff in Aerosmith. That was pretty creative.
Right. So creativity. They can also, once again, creativity. So it can be used to master great work. It can also trap someone into their own world without actually producing anything to the external world. So it also makes it so that some adult children of alcoholics build a world that they're very comfortable in, and then it's difficult for them to get out of that world. It's difficult for them to find those connections, interact with other people, or they have their self-esteem is so low that they have difficulty presenting their work. They're afraid of what feedback they're going to get.
Yeah, and just to speak to that really quick, I mean, from a personal place, it took a lot for me to start this podcast. I mean, and I was not shocked that there weren't really many others like it. And it makes a lot of sense because, yeah, our self-esteem can get pummeled when we grow up in these homes. And while we are able to heal, we're still going to get tripped up by it, right? Especially when we're presented with an opportunity that is scary and vulnerable, and that feels overwhelming, and that triggers our stress response and all that stuff. That so that makes a lot of sense. Anyway, continue, please.
Yeah, no, and just you're doing a great job on the podcast. I love your podcast. Just want to put it out there.
Thank you.
For what you do. But right, like creativity, wanting to create a podcast, and having the fears. So, but it is there that creativity is developed. Not that it's only developed in adult homes, but we tend to see that. That's one of the positives that adult children of alcoholics develop. The other one is hypervigilance. It's such a tough one because on one hand, hypervigilance the person that's hypervigilant pays attention to details. And there's actually some positives that can come along, with it. Maybe you see when there is a dangerous situation around you, or even the positives, like when you're, paying attention to what people are saying, doing things like that. But it of course takes away a lot of energy. Now, hypervigilant people are frequently very fun to be with because they see everything and they kind of pay attention. They're a little bit in the moment. So to others, this could actually be a really fun trait, having a friend that's a little bit very much paying attention, tuned in. But of course, for the adult child, that can be very, generally hypervigilance leads to exhaustion of the nervous system and things like that.
Right. And I think the bird and the truck in the background were teaming up to just kind of drown you out while you were saying that, unfortunately. But essentially, you were saying that people who deal with hypervigilance are just increasingly alert to danger, right? Or to potential danger to their surroundings, and are sort of ultra sensitive to that. And you were actually the first person to really expose me to this idea during our first chat, and it's been a game changer for me because I've always known that I've just been ridiculously sensitive to my surroundings to a debilitating level, but I never really knew the term for it. I didn't really knew the terminology, so I didn't really have a framework or a starting place for it, and learning about hypervigilance. And it's funny, my partner has told me, whenever we go into a room or a new place or something, she sees me checking out everything, I'm eyeing everything around me, and I'm it's sort of like I'm in protection mode, sort of defense mode. And yeah, I think that I agree. I think there definitely are positives, and you're right. It is exhausting, and it definitely wears down your nervous system. And but you probably are a little bit more aware of potential danger, and especially when you have a family, especially when you have a child, that's not a bad thing, right? I mean, that can definitely make a difference if there actually is danger. But yeah, it does. I find that I'm usually pretty done after being around a group of people or a new event or something like that.
Yeah. But do you also notice beauty too? Like, do you see all these birds that nobody else sees, and all the balloons floating up in the sky, and all these little details that people don't see, right?
I'm a total bird nerd. And yeah, I often will point out birds and try to identify them, and yeah, I mean,
Yeah, you also at the same time you're also seeing some of the beauty, right? That a lot of people miss.
Right, and that's another positive, I guess, of hypervigilance. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Very good at your observation skills, and all of that comes with hypervigilance.
Maybe I would have made a good detective in another lifetime.
A good detective. Yeah. Absolutely. And actually, so this is going to my next point about being a good detective, is that a lot of adult children of alcoholics, they can, well, it's interesting. It can go both ways. And I'll try to explain this the best way I can, is that we have a good sense too for lies, for BS. We can detect it. We can also detect other people's moods. We know how other people are feeling, our environment, because we had to get used to it when we were, little. And so we're very, very sensitive, hypersensitive to our environment. What are people, feeling around us? What are they thinking? If somebody is lying to us, we can detect that, right? We see like the little ways that people move their face, things like that. And so we built this trait. And once again, that one is very positive, because on the one hand, that makes, ACOAs very compassionate, empathic, because we can sense other people's, that makes us wonderful kind of caretakers. We can help other people. We notice all these things. And of course, kind of knowing when, if somebody is like lying to you or hiding information is on one hand good, right? Or even like sensing all these feelings. On the other hand, there's a balance there, that what is all this knowledge going to do to you? Sometimes if you're in a relationship, or if you're around, sometimes when you miss things that don't have much to do with you, or your personal relationship, or how somebody's treating you, sometimes missing that is perfectly fine. Like, just kind of not filling your not filling your mind with some of these things, and just letting it go. But so that's the other thing, is that that hypervigilance and that hypersensitivity can lead to really understanding, knowing your environment well. But on the other hand, it can also create a lot of anxiety for you. I mean, even if we go back to, we talked about in the last episode about being anxiously attached, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the traits of anxious attachment is scanning your relationship constantly, scanning for what your partner is thinking and feeling, and then relating it all back to yourself. So there's a limit to it that becomes unhealthy. Some things you can just let go. But adult children have a hard time doing that, because we're so in tune. Except for being so in tune doesn't necessarily serve us any benefit, right?
Yeah, and I think it's especially challenging for someone who's hypersensitive to be around someone who struggles with like mood regulation, right? Like someone whose moods are just not subtle at all, and you end up just kind of, especially through insecure attachment tendencies, you tend to kind of ride their moods, right? Like almost like the waves of an ocean. It's not very comfortable sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. That is very difficult. That is very difficult. And then the other trait, wonderful trait of being an adult child of an alcoholic, is being very responsible, particularly the adult children that tend to be in the hero stance. Not all adult children are responsible, but the adult children that tend to be in that, play the hero role. Maybe they were, maybe it's, frequently I notice if they have younger siblings, and then they start taking responsibility.
Yep.
So that hero role. So responsibility is wonderful. Now, obviously, it's a great trait, and many adult children of alcoholics are just so responsible. The problem with responsibility is sometimes lacking a little bit of ability to have fun, to enjoy yourself, right? So it's once again a balance there. Wonderful to be responsible.
Right.
Sense of humor. Many adult children of alcoholics develop a great sense of humor. Particularly ones that fall into the mascot role. They had to entertain their family, and they build this defense mechanism to make fun of the situation and post humor. And so, sense of humor, wonderful. Many comedians, just generally wonderful people to be around. Great sense of humor. Obviously taken to. And then we see this with comedians as well, right? Like alcoholism, drug addiction, things like that. A lot of pain, a lot of struggle.
Right. Yep.
So that goes the other way. So the sense of humor is outwardly. The inside hasn't gotten worked, but still a wonderful trait. Let's see. Well, another interesting, and I find this a wonderful paradox with adult children of alcoholics, that despite being very emotionally attuned to other people's needs, adult children of alcoholics are amazing at completely not recognizing when somebody has ill intentions towards them. Just amazing. If somebody is spewing aggression towards, I'm generalizing, but some adult children of alcoholics are people that come from dysfunctional families. They're amazing at just missing all those signs.
Yeah, actually, that was a symptom of complex PTSD as well, which makes sense because they're obviously often related. So yeah, do you understand kind of why that is, or have any theories?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, we're so used to being not treated well, right? Because many people that struggle with alcoholism, right? The sort of the root of alcoholism is denial. So denying their own emotions, inability to regulate their own experience, inability to regulate it within themselves. So what happens is that the alcoholics sort of pass that potato on to their children. So they might be very critical of themselves, but then they also become very critical of their children. So children get a lot of criticism frequently in alcoholic families. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of secrecy. So the child growing up in that environment is already getting a lot of, negative emotions that are being projected at them. And so they have to learn, they learn that this is normal. They learn that this is part of the world and that this is something they deserve. And they learn to ignore it because they need to, continue on being a kid. They need to continue on having a relationship with their parents. And
wow.
So, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't interrupt you, but that, so it's a survival skill.
Yeah.
Wow, fascinating. I remember researching for the episode on complex PTSD and seeing that and like having some fleeting theories, but you're absolutely right. It's totally a survival mechanism. That's really interesting.
Yeah, so they get used to that, and also there's there's a lot of anger and aggression in those families too. And so it just becomes a normal, it becomes a regular. So later on, when there is anger or aggression sort of spewed at the person that has had these experiences, whether it's alcoholic family or non-alcoholic family, person that has been severely criticized and who experience a lot of anger and aggression towards them, they just miss it. I mean, it just goes right by them. They just miss it. So another person will be like, wait a second, this person said this, or they're behaving towards me in a particular way, and they're going to make some decisions because they're going to start to feel angry inside because of the given situation. And so a person that can recognize aggression and anger driven towards them, now they're going to also have aggression and anger, which is a normal protective mechanism, and they're going to make some decisions. Do they want to have a conversation with a person? Is this a situation that needs to lead it into conflict? Do they need to not engage with this individual, right? So people gauge their environment and they can base it off the anger and aggression that they feel that arises in themselves due to the external environment. Now, with a ACOA, frequently also, anger gets directed inwards. So a situation occurs where another person is not being nice to them, not being kind to them, something that would cause for a breach of relationship or a conversation, or should cause a conflict between two people, which is normal. We're just gonna like kind of swallow it in, kind of like either ignore it and deal with it later, and that usually also goes into a form of depression as well. And that's it's a long conversation, but yeah, that's the interesting part about adult children being able to pick up on other people's energy, being able to take care of other people, help other people, but frequently totally missing when there's negativity directed towards them.
Yeah, that's insane. It's crazy how we just become these products of the need to survive. That's essentially what we are. Like arguably that's what any human is, right? But we become very specialized in surviving in these very specifically hostile environments. And some of it, like we're talking about now, can be awesome. It can be great for a stable adult life, but some of it can kick our butt. And yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Again, it can build a lot of really cool, once again, like outward qualities that are very much enjoyable, and we're great, wonderful people to be around, but inside, right, there's that struggle, and that's what needs to be addressed. And that's also part of then, some adult children of alcoholics, they have a hard time believing that they're very much liked, because it's like they develop all these wonderful qualities: sense of humor, resilience, ability to feel, other people's emotions, creativity, responsibility, right? I mean, what everybody wants. They go out to get admiration. People like them. They're social sometimes. Some are not. But all these wonderful qualities in a combination, and they're like, "Oh, you're such a wonderful human being," but inside, a lot of us are, no.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's another trait that's consistent, or symptom, or whatever we want to call it, that's consistent with complex PTSD. And it's like a person that, you're right, like checks every box as far as what you'd want to be as a person, except there's just a darkness inside, right? There's just a source of low self-esteem, of depression, of anxiety, of struggles with stress regulation, emotional regulation, mood regulation, all these sort of symptoms of the adversity we went through, that are essentially the products of, again, us needing to survive in a home of parental alcohol addiction. It's interesting, when you're talking about sense of humor and and comedians and everything. My best friend growing up, we became friends when I was 5 and he was 4, and we both lived in these poor alcohol addicted homes. We both had single moms that were both addicted to alcohol, and so we kind of like, you know, we were each other's distraction, and we would go to each other's house, and we would, you know, navigate our drunken moms and everything. And he became a stand-up comedian, and he actually isn't doing it as much anymore, but he was pretty successful and very talented and just very, very funny. So that's interesting you said that.
Yeah, so that's a big one.
His name's Robin Williams. I'm just kidding. Anyway, very cool. So you know, you're talking about hypervigilance, and you know, while you're talking about these positive sides, you know, they're like we've been discussing, there's also these negative or challenging sides. How can we maintain balance while dealing with these symptoms, and what would you recommend to someone who is trying to survive now as adults?
Yeah, so you know, the reason why I wanted to talk about these positive sides is because, you know, going back to one of these traits that adult children of alcoholics tend to not see themselves as such. I think the one thing that is very much also missing in the literature and the discussion of adult children of alcoholics is beginning to, you know, value some of these experiences and beginning to value some of these, you know, positive traits that were built as a result. And I think that also has a lot to do with, you know, forgiveness. I mean, I guess overcoming the adult children of alcoholics syndrome. It's a long journey, and everybody is individual. So we talked about, you know, the nervous system. That's something that you're very interested in, and that comes from you know, the hypervigilance traits. So when it comes to just getting into the biology and the physiology of the effect that this cumulative trauma has had is part of regulating the nervous system. Many children that grew up in a dysfunctional household, you know, they can be in a state of, you know, kind of fight or flight as far as their biology goes their whole life, and that is very taxing on the body. So
right.
Some of the ways to remedy that are breathwork exercises, learning how to breathe, taking, you know, a 4-count breath, the inhale, holding it for longer, maybe 8 counts, exhaling it for 8. The combination of that is going to help you ground yourself very acutely. That is a very kind of quick fix response. It's just that breathing method. Meditation. So training your mind. An undisciplined mind is not going to be able to heal itself. An undisciplined mind is going to go into areas of focus that are not necessary or conducive to any type of well-being. So mindfulness medication is mindfulness. I frequently say mindfulness medication, and it means to say mindfulness meditation. And I don't think it's an accident. I think that's a Freudian slip. I say this all the time because it really is a form of medication. It works.
Natural medication. Yeah, I mean, in your defense, they are like a letter different. So.
But I think it's also just to say that it is medicinal. So obviously seeing a therapist, because relationship trauma occurs in a relationship. All these traumas occurred because of the relationship in the family. And so working with somebody, being in a relationship with somebody that is knows how to work in that relational aspect can help heal those traumas.
Right.
You know, another thing that I've actually been really getting into myself and getting the sessions is acupuncture. And it would be really interesting to actually have like maybe a Chinese medicine person talk about this, because I'm not, but acupuncture is a really amazing way to balance energy and to balance the nervous system. Neurofeedback is another one. That's actually neurofeedback. And I've done this myself. They actually take a map of your brain to showcase what what parts of the brains are overworking, underworking, what your nervous system is like, and they work with you in order to heal those. But like those things like acupuncture, neurofeedback, this all requires money and time. So those are wonderful methods for just healing the body, healing the mind, really doing the work from the inside out. And also, I would really suggest even practicing, let's say, mindfulness meditation. You can do it on your own, of course. You can find a mindfulness instructor to also help you do that and learn. But another thing is, when it comes to relationships, I would suggest join a group. Even now with the pandemic, you can find groups online. You join a group, because when you do that, when you join a group, you put something on your calendar. You're more likely to actually do it rather than just leaving it to your own defenses, but also you're connecting with a community. So that connection, relational aspect, in anything that you do, you want to practice mindfulness meditation. I'm sure there's a lot of free groups that you can join, or low-cost groups at centers after the pandemic, actually going somewhere in person to practice it with other people, have that cumulative experience. Of course, the groups like Non. All right. So.
Yeah, I mean, well, and like you were saying with counseling, these groups can help us develop secure attachment skills, right?
Right.
Which essentially is a protective factor. This is an example of how, I mean, a lot of what you're saying are examples of building protective factors now. And like we've been discussing, there are all these positives of being an ACOA, and we can utilize them and do these really awesome things. Become actors, become musicians, become comedians. We can sort of use that drive to achieve these awesome things that can make our lives more enriching. But we also have to, put attention towards and tend to these, specialized struggles and challenges with including what you've just described, with a recovery portfolio, with things like acupuncture, counseling, meditation, all these tools that are available to us to heal.
Absolutely. And I think, also acceptance, right? The reason why I really wanted to go over all these positives that adult children of alcoholics build is the one thing that can come out of it is acceptance. Yes, like we've had this negative experience, but there's some positive things too that came out of it. Like you're doing a podcast and delivering all this amazing information to so many people that are just starting out their journey or have been on the journey for a while. They're learning this new information. I became a therapist, and part of it, has to do with this ability to be very sensitive and hypervigilant and take care of people. And so using that to bring some good into the world.
Definitely. Yep.
Right. Or for people that build a really good sense of humor, going out there, doing some stand-up comedy. And so learning that, we've also, that narrative, like flipping that narrative too, is that there's a lot of there's a lot of pain there, but here are some positives that we build, and taking some pride in that. This is such a cool kind of a mechanism that we built for ourselves as we were children that maybe now isn't serving us as well, and so we can do the deeper inner work to figure out how do we, feel good. And I think part of that is acceptance. It's acceptance of what has happened, acceptance of the positives that came out of it, not just focusing on the negatives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I mean, that I think helps us to overcome shame too. I mean, so much of us are so predisposed to shame, and by embracing these positives, we'll hopefully feel less shame when we're reminded of our past and these, the symptoms that we experience because of our past.
Exactly. That's the other thing, is that there's so much stigma to associated with it. And I think, or I could even say for myself, that I would experience a lot of fear, coming out with my story or sharing with someone. I didn't share with anyone for a very long time, and now I basically wrote a book about it. But the reason why I didn't want to share my experience of how I grew up was I was afraid of the stigma that was around me. And now I still, feel sometimes that whenever a symptom, let's say like a classic symptom of being an ACOA, appears inside of me, I have this feeling of like, oh my God, it was because the way that I grew up was so, so wrong and so damaged. And then we forget how many other people too have experienced all kinds of adversity, Yep. And so normalizing that, that we've had this difficult experience and there's all this trauma that came out of it, but it's also very, very, very common.
It is. Common. It's very common, and the stigma is interesting because it's so multi-layered for people like for ACOAs, because first of all, there's a stigma around addiction. So the parent or guardian who was addicted to alcohol, so there's that stigma. And then there's a stigma specifically to people addicted to alcohol, because alcohol is just the center of so many cultures and it's just so widely used. And then there's also a stigma to children who are from homes of adversity, from childhood trauma. So there's a pretty complex stigma situation for us. But you're absolutely right, and one of the ways we can overcome that is to find this solidarity and find this connection, because it is very common. So many people become addicted to alcohol, and so many of those people have children, and so many of those children end up with persistent trauma and with dysregulated stress responses and with all these other things that we're talking about. So both fortunately and tragically, we're not alone, right?
Yes. And the good news is that you actually, especially when it comes to the more like the neurological stress response, if you work hard on yourself, you can actually fix that in your body. You can do somatic therapy, you can do neurofeedback, you can go to acupuncture, set up a daily meditation practice, just do that every day. It doesn't have to be perfect. People get really wound up about whether they're doing it right. You can go to relational psychotherapy. You can practice breathwork exercise. You can do holotropic breathwork. You can try psychedelics. There's so many things out there, right? And if you create like a complex regimen for yourself to heal your body from the inside out, it's possible. It is possible. And you can't take away, you can't change your past. You can't change your past. You can change your, that physical stress response. You can work on it. But the other thing that you can't add are some of the things that were developed, like creativity, a sense of humor, being resilient,
right?
being able to see all these things, being highly responsible. There's limits to that, right? And those can become pain points too, but they can with other people. So I think the things is also just taking pride, because us adult children of alcoholics are also frequently very afraid of sharing our story and being stigmatized. But if we inside ourselves develop a sense of pride of this has happened to me and I survived this trauma, and I'm working on healing myself, even not on a physical level, but I also have all these cool traits, that maybe came out of my pain. These wonderful traits came out of my pain, and I'm proud of that. So that partially knowing that already takes away some of the shame and the guilt. And
definitely, I mean, we're like superheroes, right?
We really survived something, absolutely terrible. Sometimes if you share these stories, I'm sure you have this experience, if you share some of the stories with people that didn't grow up in homes like that, their face goes blank, oh, this happens. It's like very shocking for other people. Very shocking. So
yeah, and just real quick, because I wanna talk about your book before we wrap up, but sometimes I like to sort of talk to my body and just be like, it's okay. Like you're specialized to survive in these harsh environments, right? Like it's okay. You can calm down. Like you became really good at surviving in these circumstances, but we're not in those circumstances anymore. So you can calm the F down and flourish in these new circumstances that aren't, chronic stress and adversity. So, and sometimes it's kind of a sweet calming moment.
yeah.
Calm down, body. It's okay. It's okay. Anyway, so yeah, where it's so exciting to see that your book has been released. I can't wait to it's a workbook, so I can't wait to use it and learn from it and better myself from it. So where can we find it?
It's on Amazon, and I will send you the link, and maybe if you include the link, if the listeners are interested, they can
Definitely. Yep.
Yeah, purchase it on Amazon. It's both in print version and Kindle.
Outstanding. That's so exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Great, Sophia. Well, this has been really fun. I can't wait for the next one. And thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of your beautiful sunny day.
Thank you. Good to talk to you as always. Looking forward to the next one as well.
Thanks.